Hello, St. Patrick's and St. Anthony's Faith Community. This is Tony Allen, and I wanted to share a reflection from one of my past Holy Week experiences, specifically a foot washing instance that took place about 25 years ago. In those days, I lived in Pueblo, Colorado, and I worked and attended the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart. At that time, I had many small children, so I was out in the gathering space frequently. And one of the things that allowed me to do was meet many, many people. Two of the people that I met were Ricardo and Marie. This was an elderly couple, and Ricardo was blind. Ricardo suffered from diabetes, and he had lost his sight. And every week, as I was out in the gathering space, I would see Marie leading Ricardo up the steps of the church and into the church itself. And over those weeks, I began to greet them and began to know them a little bit. One week, Ricardo and Marie didn't come. A couple weeks later, I saw Marie come by herself. And I said, "Marie, it's so good to see you, but where's Ricardo?" She said, "Oh, Anthony, Ricardo had to have his leg amputated because of his diabetes." I said, "Will he be able to come back?" And she said, "Soon, perhaps in a week or two." Now it was coming upon Holy Week, and our staff was sitting around discussing who we could invite to have their foot washed by the bishop. And we came up with 10 or 11 names of people, and we were racking our brains to try and figure out who else we could ask. And I suggested to the staff that we invite Ricardo to come up and have his foot washed. They said, "That'd be a great idea. Why don't you reach out to Ricardo and Marie and see if it's something that they would like to do?" So I called him, and Ricardo sounded very excited for the opportunity. So on Holy Thursday, the feast of our Lord's Supper, Marie and Ricardo were coming up the steps to the church, and as I looked out there holding one of my little ones, I noticed there were probably a dozen other people coming to church with them. And they walked in, and I said, "Ricardo, it's so good to see you. But who are all these other people?" He said, "Oh, Anthony, these are my children. They're all growing, and they've come to see this event where I get my foot washed. And they brought their grandchildren with them." When the time came, Ricardo went up to have his foot washed, and you could have heard a pin drop. And as he sat there, Marie went up and helped take off his one shoe and his one sock. And Bishop Tafoya reached down and grabbed his foot and began to wash it and dry it. And the bishop was so moved by this experience that he began to cry. In fact, many people in the church began to cry. Maria was crying. I was crying. The only one who wasn't crying was Ricardo. Ricardo had this big smile on his face. 3 weeks later, Ricardo died. And it was a very sad occasion for us and for everyone in the parish. On the day of his funeral, Marie came, and with that whole group of children and grandchildren, we all came and celebrated Ricardo's life. After the service, one of Ricardo's grown children came up to me and said, "Are you Anthony?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Anthony, this is my wife, and these are my 2 children. We would really, really like to come back to the church. You see, we've been away from the church. In fact, my wife and my children haven't even been baptized. Are you able to help us with that?" I said, "Ricardo, I'd be glad to help you." Ricardo Jr., by the way. I'd be glad to help you and your family with this endeavor. But tell me, why now are you interested in coming back to the church? Ricardo Jr. looked at me and said, Anthony, my wife and I want for our family what my mom and dad had. That close, abiding faith in God. Everyone, I hope that you have a blessed Easter, a blessed Holy Week. Keep in mind our relationship with our God. Reach out to Christ in prayers. Let us lift each other up in prayer. May we all be united with one spirit. Thank you and God bless.